All right, well, welcome everyone. I want to echo our thanks for having Georgia Pacific here today. We're very excited to join this program, and it wasn't too long that I was sitting in these seats myself. So thank you very much. I am just ecstatic. So before we get started, I want to better understand our audience, and by a show of hands, how many undergrads do we have with us today? All right, and then show of hands, grad students? All right, about 50-50. Okay. So that's fairly exciting because both of you have different perspectives on where you are going next in your careers and why you're here at Georgia Tech. And Kathy here is just such a great leader within our organization and has a great story to share on her path to get to where she was today. And I think about when I was a student here, consulting had its glamour and its pros, and corporations had its opportunities, and startups were really exciting as well, and I just had no idea what those opportunities would look like. And this series really helped frame up what those various alternative paths could be for me. And so Kathy here is our consumer products president, and as was mentioned, we have all of her brands here on display: Dixie, Vanity Fair. What's your favorite, Kathy?
Dixie,
Excellent.
Ronnie, Angel Soft, Quilted Northern, Vanity Fair, all the in motion. That's in the B2B. I could go on.
It's like picking a favorite child, I'm sure.
Picking a favorite child, right.
And while she is such an incredible leader, she does have her flaws. She wasn't a Georgia Tech student, but she did go to Syracuse, and she also followed that up with an MBA from Wharton,
right,
which is very exciting. Mm-hmm. And so tell us, were you ever sitting in an audience here similar to this?
No. It was a lot different then.
How did it begin?
Well, first of all, it began, for those of your undergraduates, with getting out of school at Syracuse. I had a bachelor of science in math and a minor in physics, and I was going nowhere with those in my mind. I actually did go somewhere with those in the end because it gives you a logical thought base, right? But I was not going to be a PhD in physics, so I decided that I needed to do something, and I went into banking. And I was with Chase Manhattan Bank. That's what it was then, Chase Manhattan Bank. Not J.P. Morgan Chase. And I hated it. 2 years in, you know, you all of us now have a word called pivoting. We didn't have a word called pivoting then. It was more like leaving. And and so, but I look back on it now, and it was one of those experiences, and I hope you think this way about yourselves, that actually set the course of my life. Ooh. And I didn't realize it at the time because I was sitting around being bored, and I was working in a management development program, and it was kind of rote, and I was more into looking how to improve things. So I found a way to start improving things. It was not that welcome at the beginning. But it was welcome later on, and it kind of set the tone for everything else in my life. And so then I quit and went and got married while I was getting my MBA at Wharton. And that changed my career totally. And I had a choice between consulting, and I'm old enough that BCG was barely important. McKinsey had it all. And Arthur Anderson, what do you know? Accenture was barely alive in consulting. It was very, very different then. People went to the big consumer products companies. They went into investment banking, or they went to McKinsey, pretty much then. And so I had a choice between, actually, BCG made me an offer, and they were this little company out of Boston at the time, not so little, but pretty little, you know, and. Or go to a corporation. And the one thing I found out about myself, and you should think about yourself, is that I like being a leader. I like people to succeed. I like companies to succeed. And I want to be more a part of that than I would have been if I had been a consultant. So with this idea, I then took my next job, which didn't go so well either.
Which job was that?
Well, that was a job that I actually stayed in the company, Scott Paper Company. I stayed in this company. But I came in and I was doing, because of all my background now, keep in mind I'm math with Wharton, and I'm looking like one of these people that wants to do finance all the time. So I was in the M&A department. And after doing so many deals, the rote of the deal, it just didn't have enough for me to say that I could make things better. And so I started on a journey that I think you all should consider. And it's the journey of trying different things and moving around.
So I have to stop you here and ask you.
Yeah.
You've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
You were in the throes
We're done now.
Okay. You were in the throes of mergers and acquisitions and just constantly going, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Did you ever stop, and reflect, or what were some of those best practices to learn what you were liking about what you were doing or what you weren't liking, and framing that up as to what your next step was?
Well, back then I didn't frame up anything. I didn't. And I think you should think a little bit more about these things, but I also think you should follow your instincts when you're young. And I think the more things that you can try that are different, the better off you're going to be. And so I was doing that, and so I went up, and I because I was in that department, strategic business development, I knew, obviously I worked with the CEO and the CFO, so I simply wandered my way to the CEO's office and told him I wanted to change jobs. And I wanted to join the supply chain, and it was the global supply chain for this company. And he said no. And you might imagine that I might have said, oh yes. And so this went on a little while, because people need to get used to the fact that you want to change something so dramatically when you have a certain background, right? People don't want to hear that you want to go over there when they want you over here. If you come into my office and you want to be over here and I want you over there, you lose weeks while I discuss with you. You might call it discussing, I'm calling it arguing with you, But if you're persistent and you really have a view that you want to try different things, it changes your whole world to take risks and change functions, change companies, changes your whole world, change cities, not a very popular idea in Atlanta. Change cities, take risks. You learn things that you could never imagine, and I think these are the things that enable you one day to be a leader, because a leader is only about one thing. It's the ability to create a vision that people understand and then let them execute it. I don't do anything, and I don't mean that flippantly. I don't do anything. I pick people. And how did I learn to pick people? By jumping from function. I was in labor relations. I was in sales. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
You did not know that. See, I'm very impressed you're in sales. Sales teaches you about the only thing that matters in life, and that's customers. That's true in consulting too. No customers, no job. No customers, no chance of adding value. So sales, manufacturing, I mostly did labor relations.
Which can be extremely tenuous.
Well, back then it was very tenuous back then, because everybody was in unions then, and lots of strikes, and some of them were pretty nasty in the forest products industry. So yes, that was going on then. So that was an education. Doesn't matter though. It doesn't really matter as long as you don't just stay in one place.
Well, I know when I was at Georgia Tech, a common theme was changing majors. So I think change is definitely one that we can relate to here.
Right.
And as my peers are choosing to go back to get their MBA, changing that career focus as well, and really deliberately looking and studying in those classes. So I feel like that's very prevalent to this conversation here today. So in all of that, can you walk us through some of the rules of the road that you have?
Well, I think the first one is that you have to add value. Every job you have to add value in. And that doesn't matter if you're the housekeeper in charge of all the housekeeping staff at the Holiday Inn, or you're in charge of the supply chain or advertising, you must think of ways to add value to the ultimate end user, whether it's to the customer. In my company, we basically say the only real purpose of business is to add value, make things better for people, add value to society. That's basically what we say. Everything else is generally unimportant. It's all about making sure we can do what we say. So I think if you're a person that is constantly looking at ways to improve things and having ideas, I don't need to tell you anything else. You can leave now because you will succeed. Your mind has to always be switched on to add value. That's kind of one thing.
Add value.
Got
value.
it. The thing that goes with that, though, is the notion of as you move up in corporations, is the ability to, and this is consulting too, develop a vision or a strategy.
So what do you mean by vision?
Yeah, most misused word in the world. It's not a mission. I don't care if you're world class. This means nothing. A vision is a description of how you can add particular value in your company, in the industry you're in, that is better than what your competitors can do. It's a description of that so that you can then decide what you're going to invest in. And I don't mean capital, I mean capabilities, like digital capability, like Salesforce capability, like pricing and data analytics capability. What are you going to invest in that makes you better than your competitors so that you can find ways to make things better for your customers? I bet people around here don't know that toilet paper, does anybody in here think that we add value to toilet paper? This is a very
got a
sad.
partial hand raise right
Thank
there.
God. Okay. All right. Give him the $500. We do, and I'll tell you what we're doing. Toilet paper is made with, as you know, trees. Okay. Energy and water. We're introducing a new technology. It's already in the marketplace. We're just not telling anybody about it. That reduces the amount of energy, reduces the amount of water, and reduces the amount of fiber, therefore trees or pulp, and you still get a soft tissue. So right now you all want to go buy, 7th generation at Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, and you're buying a recycled product that actually is kind of coarse. I like this. I'm from New York, that area, so I like it. But if you want premium tissue with reduced water energy, can you imagine that in this day and age, companies, even though they're old, you might think they're old, we're investing in technology. By the way, this kind of technology, when I put one of these tissue machines on the ground with all the things that go with it, bells and whistles, and then they claim they need a roof. I never really understood that, but that's $1 billion. Every one we put down, $750 million to $1 billion. So inside
and you did
big
the math,
corporate,
and it's worth that.
It's worth that. Yeah. I'm a net present values future cash flows person. You really don't get out of my office without a calculator, really. But if you enter with a calculator without an idea of the vision and what you really think you're going to accomplish and how you're going to win versus competition, this would not be considered adding value. And does the consumer want it? So vision.
How do you know? Like, I think about going into an interview or going into an internship.
Right.
How are you able to quickly understand whether a company does or does not have a clear vision and whether you're aligned with that vision?
Right. Well, like any other interview, you should ask them what the vision for the company is first. I mean, that's the easy answer. But what you're looking for is something I think maybe a little more specific. You think about the job they're going to offer you. and you think about whether or not that job gives you enough room to do what you think you could do with it. I know you're going to get trained and you don't really know, but you have to say, is it a task-oriented job? So I feel like when I came out of Wharton, I was doing a task-oriented job. I was out calculating every which way to Sunday the deal. Now, let me tell you, it was fun for a while. You know, when you be on a deal team, it's fun. It's still fun. I like being on deal teams. They don't invite me anymore unless I'm buying something. But it is. It's fun. But it was very task-oriented. How do you make that better? How do you improve that? So if you're going to get a job in an M&A area, in what ways do you get to expand the thought? What industries can you work across industries? Same in consulting. That's what you're looking for. What vision do they have for you in the role? Where can you go? If you can't get good answers about that, then I would think you wouldn't be going. The consulting firms that will interview here are all excellent consulting firms. The question is whether you're a match for what they want you to do. They're all good. You'll learn a heck of a lot. But if you want to get on the journey of leading a major corporation, then you need to think about what you want to do differently. And then how do you start that? And you want to go to a company that has long-term intent.
So we want to go to a company that's got a long-term vision that we're aligned with.
Yep.
We know that they're adding value to the customer in a customer-focused manner.
Yep.
What else would you consider just must-haves?
Well, I would say the way I would talk about it is in terms of individual freedom. So individual freedom is something you talk about in the press, evidently lately. Okay. But individual freedom is just as important inside a company. And so it comes back to whether or not the role you have gives you enough room to really make an impact. So if you come in a company and the first thing, you have to learn things for a while, but if you spend your whole career doing media buys, you're in advertising, you're doing media buys, I don't know that that's enough for you to impact the big picture. You have to start moving around, so you have to get a chance to learn something bigger. And that's true, very important inside a company. A little less important in consulting because they'll move you across industries and you'll learn. It's all about learning in the first 5 years, right? 10 years?
Forever.
We'll get to that too. We'll get to that. Lifelong learner, yeah. Yes.
Well, I think some of my classmates when we were here, I was just always astounded by their interests, and they were from A to Z. And when we talk about vision, they were probably thinking it was a character in a movie.
Right.
You know, it's just the passion just ranged, and everyone here had a passion.
Right.
And to think about the concept of individual freedoms as you're talking about in a corporation is the ability to explore that within the context of that vision.
Right.
And it's
I
exciting.
would prefer the world not have job descriptions all over the place. I kind of do not get what that does.
Why do you say that?
I would prefer that the world talk about your role. What's your greater purpose? So what is the greater purpose of, let me pick on advertising again, an advertising job?
You want to throw that out to the audience?
Yeah.
All right.
What's the greater purpose? People up front with
I see a hand.
Yes, a hand, yes.
Customers to buy your product?
That's a purpose. The greater purpose is to save the world with the best products that out there because you're advertising them. How many good things sit on the shelf for 20 years because we blew it? Lots of things. You also advertise the great ideas of the world. Do people really understand what free markets are? Have we advertised that? But you go into the corporation, you ask, what's my role really? What's my greater purpose, and maybe you could ask it a little low key, so that you don't come across as, but that's what you're listening for. And when they hand you the job description, I think you need to be careful about whether, because all companies have job descriptions, about what the role is, not the job description. And you're looking for this individual freedom, right? You're looking for, who are you going to interact with? How can you add value? What are some examples of people adding value? There's a lot of companies that'll give you a task-oriented job that doesn't allow you to add value. That's what you have to watch.
So could you give us an example from your career specifically where you were looking to increase that responsibility, that role, and what responsibilities tied to that role?
Yeah, so after I got out of the supply chain, so anyway, I was kind of working my way up the supply chain because in a tissue company, but it was a global tissue company, and I wanted to learn how to work across the globe. And so meanwhile, I managed to, after a couple of years, not very long really, to get them to give me the whole thing. And that's when I reorganized around different roles. I wouldn't have called them that then. I would have called them job descriptions. I understand they were roles because I was never good at writing job descriptions. That's why I want them eliminated. So I was writing roles. I think you've got this whole group of people and this role. We were working together. Do you think this makes sense? Do you think that makes sense? So after I had that experience for several years, then I went to sales. And once again, nobody liked that idea.
I don't know why not.
Because when you start jumping functions all the time, that does bother companies because, and it bothers me sometimes too when people do it because I rely on them and it takes me a minute to think, yes, you need to go do that. But that teaches you another whole set of skills. So you go to sales, and there is, I think the greatest joy on earth is actually seeing the real people, the customer. I will not let myself ever get removed from the customer. And the customer is sometimes the consumer. I have a business where it's a couple of businesses, but one is the consumer, and the customer is Walmart and Costco, and and then another group where the customers are distributors and hotels and motels. But don't ever let yourself get separated too far from the customer. Who are you really in business for?
That's great.
So,
all right, so we've got vision, added value, our individual freedoms.
right.
What else are we looking at?
Well, at least for the people that are working for me, I'm very, very concerned that they stay tuned in and be what I would say citizens of the world. I think that you need to understand the difference between free markets, and I'm going to hope we've eliminated communism. For those of you who, you're all too young, I think mostly, a couple of people I see here I might question, but but I was there 1 year after the Berlin Wall came down because I was doing business in Germany. By the way, you should always try to live overseas too. And so I was coming down the main drag of Germany, past the Brandenburg Gate, down past what would have been Checkpoint Charlie, and there were some things left up, but not so you'd notice so much. Kept on going. I was going to a customer meeting on the other side. Would have been East Berlin. And when I got to the other side, I had to stop the gentleman who he and I were making the call, and I said, "You need to stop. I can't believe what I'm seeing here. Everything had rotted. No advertising anywhere. No spirit. That's what communism wrought. Communism is the ultimate tragedy of the commons. If you pay everybody for everything and nobody for anything, that is what you get. So let's say we can eliminate that one. So now the big debate is how far do you want to interfere with the free market? And that's, some people are calling it is, so how far do you want to push socialism? And I think whatever your answer is, you need to study these things. You need to study Hayek, you need to study Keynes, and you need to think about that. Because you cannot be a leader or a citizen of the world without having some principles around that. You can't be a citizen of the world without having principles around individual freedom. They don't all have to be the same. You just need to know what they are and why you believe that. You can't be a citizen of the world if you're not studying all the countries of the world. I think between the value adding, the vision, and that, you should have it locked. Not quite, but I say you should have it locked if you do that kind of thing. But you have got to take seriously the difference between macroeconomics, microeconomics, how a book that has anybody in here read? It's not Masters of the Universe. It's The Clash That Defined Modern Economics, Hayek and Keynes. Has anybody read that book? Nobody ever reads that book but me. I have asked this at my
Literally
business.
not a
Of course,
hand
I have thousands of people that work with me, and nobody ever raises their hand. I don't know what the problem is, but anyway, that is one of the great books. It's a history book, and it lets you see what all the subtle arguments were and what people were worried about in the context of the times they lived in. And that's coming in and out of World War I and worrying about communism. And Hayek, of course, worried about communism. That's where he became basically a classical liberal, afraid of anything that interfered with the free market. And that's probably, that's the extreme side, right? Libertarianism. So very, very important that you do that, I would say.
Well, I think what's great, I got the opportunity to talk to Kathy before today, and she just has such great book recommendations because she loves math, but she also has studied so much about the economies and the economic thoughts behind different economies, and definitely was something that I wish I would have been a little bit more privy to when not privy to.
Well, you know what, if it makes you feel any better, I sat all the way through Wharton, got graduated at the top of my class with a dual degree and wrote my thesis in economics and never thought about the stuff in that book. I don't know what I was doing. So I think you're all smarter than I ever was. I think social media has made you brilliant. I really do. But when you come into my office, your age group, I just can't believe what I'm seeing. So you won't make those mistakes, but you do need to widen your reading a bit so that you can just read for enjoyment. And I always say, don't read the whole book, for God's sake. You can probably get through the first 3 chapters and you're done. And now this book, you will read the whole book, but other books, I could say you could get through the first 3 chapters.
There's an app for that now.
There's an app? Oh, for God's sakes, I figured that. Go figure. I think the other thing, and I'd like to comment a little bit, is on what in my company we would call the challenge process, and what in your world you would call diversity, and what in my world I would call diversity and inclusion. So it's one thing to get a diverse group of people at the table, but if they're all on the surface, I'm talking about diverse as to race and religion and that kind of thing, on the surface. But if they're all buddy engineers, this is not a diverse group. And they will all think the same, eventually. Or the other diversity problem you can have is that you do have a diverse group, but the in crowd takes over every meeting. The in crowd doesn't know how to let the other group in. That's what the inclusion problem is. There's a great Harvard professor. Her name is, I think, Anne Fry. Does anybody know that name? Nobody ever raises their hand. I know, this is...
You gotta give them a gimme.
I have to, but anyway, she has a model. She came in and is helping Uber fix itself. That's who she is. And she, as you can imagine, that's been a charming ride here. I think she's done with what she's doing. But this whole thing about diversity and diverse thought that can change the world of your company requires your ability to the leadership ability to include people who actually won't step up and speak out because they're on the fringe of things. And I know in my lifetime, I haven't always done very well with that. A little bit, given from the generation I come from, I would tend to have a lot more diversity associated with me and be comfortable with that because I had to be the only woman in the room for 40 years. But it's not male, female, black, white. It really is about this diverse thought, and it's your ability as a leader. So when people say, I'd like you to come to a diversity inclusion training class, I don't know what they're saying in those training classes, but to me it is about drawing out what that other person, these people that aren't the in crowd, have to say that may be different than what the in crowd is saying at your staff meetings.
When you're talking about that, one of my favorite TV shows pops in mind.
Yeah.
Anybody in here like Silicon Valley? I see you.
Okay.
It just,
What happens in Silicon Valley?
my
I think
goodness.
I've missed this one.
they're brilliant.
They're bad.
Pied Piper.
Yeah.
Bless their hearts, they try.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they don't really have any business minds on them until one poor soul who wasn't necessarily part of the in crowd came along, but he helped straighten their path.
Right. Right.
But it really does come down to looking at that
So if you think,
cross functionality.
I don't know. Anybody do any work with Uber or not? I mean, I don't know.
I participated.
Okay. So, it's going to be a great case study about here is one of the greatest ideas of the digital world to make our lives better. And he keeps all his friends together and they're all doing one thing and they don't try to, this is the vision problem. Who are you really? Are you sure how you can make money so that this idea lasts? Who do you need to help you? Christ, she could have written all this down in about 2 weeks and then started hiring people. So if you're going to Silicon Valley, you're going to start something up and you're going to become Mark Zuckerberg. Could you please stop and think who you need so that these successful, brilliant ideas don't hit major roadblocks and we almost lose them, or pivot out and they're MySpace. Does anybody even know who MySpace is? I guess you do. So it just is this vision thing of writing down what you really need to do to succeed. Write down where you need to work to succeed. So if you're Uber, you would be working on technology. But that just can't be the only thing. But since they were all working on technology, and it's all the high-fiving guys stuff, I work with a lot of high-fiving guys. I know what they look like. But, you need to have different mix of people, and you need an HR person who's not part of the in crowd. That would have helped.
So if you ever find yourself in that position where you're looking around and you are getting, kind of groupthink going on,
Yeah.
Are there any best practices or recommendations that you have on how to kind of break that and insert a disruptor?
Well, one thing, and I know you probably can't tell that from me up here right now, but humor. I think humor softens everything. Humor allows everybody to feel comfortable with a bad thing that you've all done, that you can now correct. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't know what you're doing or what jobs. If you go somewhere, make sure that you're with people that laugh a little bit. Nobody's going to die if the roll of toilet paper isn't made today. Maybe tomorrow if I don't give you any toilet paper, but not the first day, okay? But just humor and enjoying yourselves at work and taking the edge off a bit when things aren't right. And then finding it is okay. We call it the challenge process. We specifically call out this thing we call challenge. And it is, it's just debate and discourse that brings different ideas together so that you can sort through them all and figure out what the best thing to do, either to solve a problem or build a company. Solve a problem or build a company, either way. But for all of you who are going to be entrepreneurs, and some of you are going to be entrepreneurs, just to take a minute and think about a wider idea than the exact thing you're building can save your company. And by the way, those of you going to run big companies, thinking about a wider set of things can save your company too. It's not just, is that helping you or no?
It is,
Okay.
and we have about 5 minutes left before we're going to take questions
I see the
from
guy,
the crowd.
our friend up here
Yeah,
with the
it's
timing.
glaring at me.
We could eliminate him. We don't have to really talk to him. But, do you want to be part of the in crowd and follow him, or do you want to do something else? So maybe we close on lifelong learning.
I think that's a great place.
Lifelong learning. Okay. So I've already talked to you about changing functions as part of lifelong learning. So don't let somebody tell you that you can't join sales because you've never sold anything. Don't let somebody tell you you can't do operations in a factory, and I mean at the senior levels. I don't mean running the machine. I don't know. Well, actually, that could help too, depending on the machine. But I'll just leave that aside. But don't let people tell you that you can do this. Pick 3. Just get 3 covered, and you got it. So mine was finance, treasury, M&A. I call that 1. Supply chain 2, sales 3, all other fooling around, doing labor relations and all that, that's just extra. By the time you have 3, you start to know how to lead different kinds of people. And more importantly, you can spot successful people and you can hire them. This is the thing. Lifelong changing functions. Sometimes I think too many people aren't taking risky assignments. I just had an example where I offered somebody an opportunity who I knew he would be really, really good at it. He was kind of afraid to take it. He's happy where he is. I'm thinking to myself, are you crazy? So what, you fail? So what? That's why they invented pivot. Just keep that in mind when you're failing. Failing in a business, failing personally, you just say pivot, and it all sounds better, doesn't it? I mean, you have no money, but you pivoted. You're in good shape, okay?
You can write it on your resume.
Yeah, right.
Pivoter.
Associate with diverse ideas. This is find people with diverse ideas to associate with a bit. You don't have to go out drinking with them every weekend, but just find people that think about things differently than you do. But read relevant books. Not too many, and don't feel like you have to read it all. And just find things that, so that you wake up one morning and I say you can live in the trajectories of the future. Because if you read enough, you can start to see the future coming at you. And then you can start to live in it, and then you can start to learn from it. And that changes your world. And I am so excited for this generation. You have the whole digital world ahead of you. Nothing is going to be the same in 20 years. And I always say, keep in mind that you can't consult if there aren't any companies to consult to. So you want me to be successful and happy. All right, well, so anyway, thank you for having me, and I guess we're taking questions.
We're going to be overachievers and finish 30 seconds early.
Okay,
so just to wrap up, we're adding value to society.
Yep.
We're going to be a citizen of the world, individual freedoms.
Right, learn how
diversity,
to develop a vision, right?
And become a lifelong learner.
Become a lifelong learner.
All right. Well, with that, I know we've got a couple mics, and they're going to be walked around the room. Do we have anyone who wants to ask some? Oh, we got a second question. Can we get this young lady a mic? And if you're going to ask a question, we just ask that you introduce your name and your major and hit her with your hardest question.
I thought they were talking to you. You asked for the question.
My name is Nidhi. I'm a computer science major. And my question is, you kept on mentioning that you should change your career every couple of years. How many years do you recommend staying in the same role? And how do you initiate that conversation that you're going to change?
Okay, so at the beginning, 3 years. All right, 3 to 5 max. 5 if you're moving up and it's expanding the role, right? 3 to 5 years. The first thing, you have to be successful in what you're doing. so that you earn the credibility of the person that you're going to ask for to give you a chance doing something different. So, and then the next job, I'd say you should probably think about the same. By the time you're on the third job, you're starting to acquire people reporting to you. And then you've really got to learn how to be a leader. You start out and you're taking care of yourself. Now, when you're taking care of yourself, you can be a leader. You can attract people with your ideas and how you think about things. So you can be a leader in that sense. But a leader of people, you want to get to as soon as you can. So if the second round, hopefully you first 3 years, next 3 years, and then move on to a function where you can take over some people. And like I said, I took over a function where I didn't know it and I had the people. So put yourself out there. Take some risk. The worst that happens is you're fired. Honestly. And does that really matter? No. Going for your next job, I would have some explanation for that, but I don't
Wanted to pivot.
I was fired because I was pushy. It's not a good one. But that's okay. Get fired, fail. Just try to do it, before you're 35, and then kind of get on a path. Then find yourself. Find who you really are and go for it.
It's a great question.
Great question.
You got another one right here?
I'll do that. I'm a CS major. I'm wondering, you talked about all these values like inclusion and like mixing the in-crowd with the out-crowd and having a vision. What are the kinds of questions that we can ask in our interviews and in our networking to find those places? Because I know those values are kind of subtle and hard to see.
Questions you can ask in the interview. I would say it's more like answers you can see by the number of people you meet while you're interviewing. So if they're moving you around, you're only meeting like 3 people, I don't know. You want to meet enough people so that you can sense how they interact with each other. And you'll be able to see that, because if you're interviewing in a particular business, if you meet 5 people, they'll all know each other. You'll start to feel the camaraderie, or you won't feel the camaraderie. You can ask them questions about you can ask them how they work on their vision or strategy. You can ask how they work on how they're organized by P&Ls. So some companies you go in and the P&L's sitting at the top. Like there's no smaller profit and loss statements that people can learn with. In my company, underneath the two of the presidents that are in this group are categories. We call them categories. They are P&Ls. Now, one of them has $3 billion. We call them a category. That's a bit annoying, but anyway. $3 billion of revenue, but nevertheless, there's many MINI P&Ls that people can learn. So that's another thing. You want to kind of get a feeling, how do I interact with the business so that I can actually run something? How do you move up? How are they a little bit organized? These are the kinds of things. But you're looking for camaraderie across the entire group. And if they don't give you enough people to interview with, I'd be careful about that.
And I think that, going off of that statement
How did you
is
feel when you
leveraging these people in these rooms and in your classrooms, and they're going to go into some of these companies that you may eventually interview for, and your professors as well. Most of them have come from industry. Talk to them. You get the insider scoop before you show up for the interview.
How did you feel when you first came to Georgia Pacific? I hope you have the right answer up here. This could be a very bad moment. I understand. I'll think of a way to recover. Go ahead, answer the question.
Well, I actually interned out at Koch Industries when I was
Georgia Pacific
junior.
is owned by Koch Industries, K-O-C-H.
I knew nothing about it, to be completely honest.
Yeah,
I was not
yeah.
deliberate and studied, before going into it. And, before I even arrived for the internship, I had received a copy of The Science of Success, which is a book that really highlights market-based management
Yep.
and embraces the
Company
drivers
philosophy.
of free markets and how we utilize that within our company. And so reading it, I fell in love with it.
Yep.
But it wasn't until I showed up on day one and realized the company really embraced that.
Yeah.
From my boss to the fellow interns.
Yeah, you could
and
feel it. Could you feel it in
Yeah.
the interview process at all?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you will pick up that sense as you start interviewing with someone. And you can tell when there's a scripted answer, and you can tell when there's something that they're truly being honest about. And use your gut feel. Like there's a reason why we've got guts, and you got to trust them sometimes. And the question that I love being asked as the interviewer is, what makes you get out of bed every morning? It's fairly simple, but you're spending 8 hours minimum a day working for this company. What makes you excited to get out of bed and come into work every day?
There's a lot to be said about find your passion.
Absolutely.
And you won't find that maybe in the first couple of jobs. I didn't. I was annoyed for 4 years.
But learning what you don't want to do is just as important.
Learning what you don't want to do is just as important. Find your passion. I mean, that's not a trivial statement, and I think but you know it when you see it, right?
Absolutely.
When you interview with people, if they're not passionate, if they're like this and they're not passionate and the whole company isn't passionate, well, if you're a passionate person, I would suggest you go elsewhere. If not all companies that are like this are not good companies to work for. I mean, if you relate better to that, then that's okay too. It's just know yourself a little bit, right? Every company will have a set of principles they live by. They'll all have them. But I want to just give you one example for Georgia Pacific Coke Industries, and it's the integrity principle. I've never seen a company that wrote the integrity principle the way it's written at Coke Industries. It's without courage, there can be no integrity. Courage is required to have integrity. So when you're looking at somebody's principles, they'll all say they'll all be the same topics. The question is there something written there that says, boy, somebody is infusing different meaning? And I really can see what that is, and I really buy onto it.
All right, we have another question. Thank you for holding your hand as long as you did.
Oh, gosh. Then you're right there in front, and we have been ignoring you. Go ahead.
Right. So my name's Alex. I'm with the Executive MBA program. And actually I have two things. One is I completely agree with the passion thing. It's certainly why you do it, not what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so a question I have is, certainly Lindsay and I are both in the kind of the consumer packaged goods world.
Oh, you are?
Yes, actually my company has done business with your company in the past.
Okay, I'll see you
Thank you for that.
afterwards.
Yeah, let's talk. Yeah, let's have the talk afterwards.
Okay.
So a lot of these CPG brands are going direct to consumer. The digital world's taking over. They're trying to understand how do we sell to the consumers because
Yep.
they're changing how they behave, how they purchase, all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
How is Georgia Pacific adjusting to the way you market your brands to consumers?
So one of the things that we do a lot of, whether it's on the product side or on the capability side you're asking me about, is experimenting. Experimentation, that's another thing you can look for in a company. Do they do a lot of experiments? We have experiments going on all things digital that hit the marketplace. We're not happy with how social media is actually reaching consumers yet. So we have several different experiments going on there trying to hit that differently. We're not happy with the brands in general are all thinking about what they need to do to be able to not let the retailer power totally absorb them. So there's all kinds of experiments for that. That doesn't mean the retailers aren't going to be here. Retailers they're great. They're hard to deal with, but they're still great. Yeah, and so we have all kinds of data analytics going on to figure out exactly how to reposition certain niche brands. We have a lot of niche brands that people have interest in for different reasons, and we want to be able to get that advertising message out there so they can, I always say, choose to reject it, but at least know it's out there, so that kind of thing. So all kinds of things in the digital world. We're building, and then of course at the same time we really are building data lakes, and we are doing it, like I said, with SAP. Some people do it with Oracle, some people do it with Infor, but we are absolutely doing all of that now too, so that we can get to the marketing side of this locked out. So I always say, and especially if you're in a B2B business, every consumer or customer is entitled to buy the product any way they want to buy it. Online, on the real shelf, directly from me, any way they want to buy it. They're entitled to get it how they want it. So I think that's what you'll see in the world.
Are you going to start peddling toilet paper after this?
Pretty much.
Did you have a question,
Yeah,
Lindsay?
I was kind of piggybacking on his as far as what kind of omni-channel strategy or global strategy you're looking at. We just got back from China with a program, and you are completely right on communism, but it is a huge market. So what are you guys doing to capture any of that business?
Well, Georgia Pacific, in my business, we sold our European business and we're not in China yet. The technology we're building is going to go to China. Yeah. And I used to do a lot of business in China, and I actually buy a lot from China because we're also one of the largest dispenser manufacturers in the United States. And
Kroger partner in Valley Bob.
yeah, that's been a very interesting move, I thought, by them. I thought that was good. I thought that was very smart. Yes, I really did. So I think China. I actually don't really consider China communist exactly. I think they lost that battle. I do think that because of their central government and their Belt and Road and Silk Road Initiative, the BRI, that they have the ability, and they've done this my whole life. Once they decide they want to do something, they fund it. And they still have a lot of people who are not participating in today's world, that they need to get off the farm and help. And so I think all of these things, that China is going to be an absolutely world force. And when I say go live overseas, if I were, and this is a risk-taking thing, if I were 25, I would be on the road to China, and I'd be living over there. My daughter actually works for a Chinese company, and she works for a Chinese company located in Xiamen, which is where the university is, that's working on all the BRI initiatives. You must pay attention to China, and I worry about them a little bit. I mean, I worry about them in terms of their taking over other countries economically, if not politically, and all of those things you have to worry about. But over 100 years or 50 years, as people learn how to add value and do many more interesting things, and people become wealthier, you cannot hold people down in the end. And China will not be able to either. I wish they would quit spying on everybody. This I find extremely annoying. But, at this point, I've released all my information somehow or other anyway, so spy as you will. But bad spying. But pardon me?
They're good at it.
They're very good at it. We all could take a lesson, yes.
So I'm going to
WeChat, source of all spying information, yeah.
We've got time for one more question. Do we have, I see some pointing in this. Oh, there we go.
Hi, my name is Steven. I'm a computer science PhD student. So you pretty much answered the question that you alluded to a lot of the points that I was going to ask about. Mm-hmm. So you talked about personal freedoms a lot and
Yes.
how important it is to develop that. So my question would be, what led you to develop your personal freedoms, and how do you feel that those personal freedoms should impact your business with people who have different views of personal freedoms?
Oh, right, okay. I don't at all mind different views on these things, unless they're I mean, unless they're wrong or criminal, you know what I mean? I really don't mind if people have different views. What I'm concerned about relative to individual freedom in the firm has to do with allowing people to reach the potential they can to add value to the company. So I'm always concerned about people's, like I said to you, roles. And when I see somebody like trapped in a role, and I do, I mean, I interfere. I go, what is that person just doing that for? This is not a welcome interference sometimes, but I do, because the one thing I have learned in my life is let people find who they are, what their comparative advantage is, and you give them a role that kind of sits pretty much there. They will do the most spectacular things you can imagine. I have one of the businesses under me. I was brought into Georgia Pacific to clean it up. It was going down, and I did clean it up, and in a hurry, because it was literally going down. And then I spent the next amount of time thinking about, okay, now we're going to go up. So what do we need to do in product development? How much money what do I need to do to help sales capability, pricing capability? What do I need to do for long-term R&D? How are we going to fund all this? Once we all agreed, there was about 10 people, and how we got on an evolution of experimentation in each one of these areas, different people in charges of different things, bringing in new talent, and then letting people do what they want to do. I cannot tell you how successful that business is today. And in the end, I had nothing to do with it, because by that time I was moved upstairs to get out of the way. And I'm telling you, they did it. And it's because of personal freedom, individual freedom. I don't say personal, I say individual freedom of the roles they had, and that the space was clear, that they just went on and did magnificent things. And so I don't bring the politics of individual freedom in so much as the spirit of individual freedom, that part of it. Does that answer your question, or did I duck you?
It does.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure I didn't duck.
Excellent. I think it's time to hand over to
Okay.
Dory. But once again, we want to thank you for coming out today. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Before you leave, just a quick reminder that Impact is taking a break next week, but we will have another interesting talk here hosted by Dean Alavi with the CEO of Delta Airlines at Bastion. There are a couple more seats for that, so please RSVP online to secure your seat, and then Impact will be back in 2 weeks with the president of Redwoods Group. Please join me in thanking one more time our guests for today, Lisa and Kathy. I hope you had